Kenya, East Africa, a country of mountains, big game, wildlife, and the Great Rift Valley. Its capital, Nairobi, is a busy modern city, noted for its large central park and jacaranda trees. Kapenguria is the main town of West Pokot, a rural district 400 kilometres north of Nairobi. The road to it crosses the equator and passes through the town of Eldoret to Kitale, where in those days the tarmac ran out. From there on, the roads to Kapenguria were dusty in dry weather and sticky in wet. On national holidays, a rally was held at the nearby trading centre of Makutano. The district commissioner would read out the president's speech to the nation. This was followed by a number of dancing and singing groups, ending with the Pokot warriors displaying their war dance. But what was life really like when the celebrations were all over? In West Pokot there was very little employment and no vocational training opportunities anywhere nearby in the district. A lot of people still followed a nomadic lifestyle, herding flocks of sheep and goats. However, many people had become Christians, and they wanted their young people to lead more useful lives. At one primary school, head teacher Isaac was keen for all the children in his school to have the opportunity of learning a useful trade skill when they left. In Pokot churches, it was the custom at the end of the service to go out forming a circle while singing a Pokot chorus. That way, everyone greeted everyone else. This was one of our favourite picnic sites at 2,500 metres above sea level. The air here was beautifully clear. You could easily see for 60 kilometres on a good day after rain. David Payne, a Christian Rural Service agriculturalist with the Anglican Church of Kenya, had seen the need for vocational training in West Pokot since his arrival in 1971. The idea of starting a village polytechnic was discussed at the annual community development meetings in the early 70s, and it was approved. Enquiries with Tier Fund resulted in Peter Stainer, a mechanical engineer, arriving in Kapenguria in 1976 as a Christian Service volunteer, with a brief to build and start Kapenguria Village Polytechnic. In the meantime, David had started a small carpentry workshop in Chepereria, a small town down at a lower altitude. Let's go down and see what they are doing, with one instructor and 4 or 5 trainees. By 1979, they were starting to build their own permanent workshop and were producing wooden top bar beehives and cement water storage jars. Peter visited regularly to offer help and advice.
Roda vídeo. Haya, karibu. Haya, inaendelea. Onyesha watu jinsi ya kufanya.
Mnapiga tu hivi. Mnaona?
Unaona?
Mnaona? Hivi tu.
Roga hivyo. Haya, karibu.
David had plans for a much larger workshop at Kapenguria to offer training in several trade skills. The first task was to set up a management committee to take full responsibility for the operation of the Polytechnic from the very beginning. Peter agreed to serve as advisor and secretary to the committee. David advised that the committee be made up of 1 or 2 government officers, like the education officer here, a clergy person, and some parents with a vision to see young people in the area learning practical skills. The clerk to the council, Mr. Jackson Katina, visited sometimes and had been very helpful in allocating and marking out the site, generally guiding us on administrative and legal matters. Here were some parents willing to join the management committee, and of course head teacher Isaac was keen to join as well. At our first management committee meeting, we all shared our hopes and dreams for the Polytechnic. At the second meeting, one member suggested that Peter should travel around Kenya and find out what conditions led to successful projects and what prevented them from working well. Peter reported back that he had been inspired by an ox cultivation that he'd seen near Bungoma, where they were using the Indian method of ploughing with oxen. This method had been taught at Sereri Research Station in Uganda, and Peter was convinced that ox ploughing would be beneficial in West Pokot. After some discussion, it was agreed to run carpentry and metalwork courses and ox ploughing, if we could find the right person to offer instruction. Gradually the site was cleared of scrub. A start was made on building staff houses, followed by the main workshop. Here a builder was fitting an air brick to a ventilator hole in the wall. These are still vital in homes with charcoal burners, which give off poisonous carbon monoxide fumes. That pile of stones in the background was broken up by hand from a single large rock found very close to the Polytechnic site. Here another builder is sloping the top of a manhole cover for a drain. It was time to start building the workshop. The workshop size was set at 25 metres square, with a number of concrete pillars to support the roof. The walls were to be made of murram, a soil with a high content of crushed rock. This was mixed with some sand, lime, water and 3% cement. The soil mix had to be compressed in a special machine called a Sinver ram. to squeeze out the surplus water. The block was then taken out and carefully placed on the ground to dry for a week. The hard block was then ready for building. We made 30,000 blocks. Probably more than 1,000 bags of cement were mixed by hand during the building period. And from time to time, various government officers would call in to see their progress for themselves. But we're not forgotten about the lonely herdsman needing to grow more food for his family. He had to plough by hand, hoe, if he could not afford to use a tractor. Then it was time to look for staff. Our first appointment came to us as a surprise. Patrick Malaba had already been trained at Sereri Research Station in Uganda in the Indian method of using oxen, and had later been employed to carry out extension work on visiting nearby villages to train farmers and their oxen in this method. The management committee interviewed Patrick and decided to appoint him straight away as our ox cultivation instructor. He started by preparing a demonstration plot with 2 oxen that we bought at local market, and then listed likely villages to visit and hold demonstrations. We then advertised in the national press for a metalwork instructor manager and chose Mr. Moses Songol from a short list of applicants. Moses knew of a good carpentry instructor and brought him for interview. Mr. David Suge was then appointed. Teaching began in pilot form from about September 1978.
Kwa vile nimeona wakulima wengi wamejaribu kutoa hii vitu vyote, wametoa hii tembele yote na hii kitu. Sasa wanatumia kitu kama hii, wanachukua kitu hii na kuweka hapa mbele.
When visiting groups of farmers in the district, Patrick would begin by thanking the village chief for calling the meeting and explaining the advantages of using properly trained oxen for ploughing, weeding and transporting loads. He told them that they could plant more crops at the time the rain started using oxen than by hand hoeing. Timely crops meant more food, and some of the surplus could later be sold for cash. And he added that they could plough and weed for other farmers and earn some money that way. Patrick then asked for volunteers, explaining that they could buy all the equipment at a good price from the village Polytechnic, who would also repair old ploughs. 1 or 2 hopefully would sign up. Back at the Polytechnic, a farmer had brought his oxen to be nose punched to prepare for training. A hole was made through the nose wall of the ox, and a short nylon rope passed through and tied behind the horns. This is the key to steering the ox. Some healing oil was then poured over the small wound. The ox didn't seem too bothered by it. Farmers would come to the Polytechnic for spare parts for ploughs or for medicine for sick cows. By 1979, the workshop was working with 10 students learning carpentry and 10 students learning metalwork, and a bit of ox training was also given. Today the carpentry students were learning how to plane wood. How to play it square without cutting themselves. Most of the time anyway. The metalwork trainees were working on different projects. Dismas was making a card index box. Three trainees were drilling a large hole through some fairly thick metal.
Mambo ya nyuki inaendelea. Mambo yake inaonekana si mbaya.
Paolo and Simon were making an experimental beehive. And three other trainees were assembling an experimental wooden framed plough. There's only one way to know if the plough is going to work. Try it. The introduction of ploughing with oxen was almost a technological breakthrough for West Pokot. At last the big day arrived for the official opening ceremony. The guest of honour was Mrs. Muruguri, the Provincial Youth Training Officer from Nakuru. She was shown the ox ploughing. And she had a go herself. The lady was then shown round the workshop, first the carpentry section, and then she was shown around the metalwork section. The manager, Moses, welcomed her to the Polytechnic and presented her with an upholstered stool that the students had made. Mrs. Muruguri replied very positively, saying that she was impressed by the new Polytechnic and would recommend it to be adopted by the government, who would then cover staff salaries. A wall plaque was unveiled by Mrs. Muruguri, watched by governors and staff. The text on the plaque reads, "Work for the Lord always," 1 Corinthians 15 verse 58. It marked the completion of 4 years' work by many people in building and staffing the Polytechnic. Everyone was pleased with its progress and hoped it would continue to grow. We thanked God for helping us through all the difficulties we had met on the way. And Peter Stainer could now return to his family in the UK, having completed his assignment. The day concluded with refreshments for everyone at the advisor's house. At the showground at Makutano, it was clear that Pokot culture was changing as more and more people became Christians. Young people were beginning to learn good trade skills, which would make a useful contribution to the life of the nation. Moses Songol used to help Henry, the manager of Sheperia workshop, with bookkeeping. Kapenguria Village Polytechnic was now developing under Kenyan leadership.
Ewe Mungu wangu uliyeniumba, ninasikitika na dhambi zangu. Ulinikomboa kutoka dhambini, ili nirithi uzima wa milele. Ewe Mungu unipendaye, nasibu naomba unisamehe. Ewe Mungu unipendaye, nasibu naomba unisamehe. Katika dunia kuna shida nyingi, ni wewe unaye nisaidia. Utakaporudi kuwachukua wateule wako, nichukue nami. Ewe Mungu unipendaye, nasibu naomba unisamehe. Ewe Mungu unipendaye, nasibu naomba unisamehe. Nawe ndugu yangu uwe tayari kumpokea Mwokozi wako, uyatengeneze mapito yako.